Today, we are jumping into a huge economic debate, one that really shapes how our entire economy is managed. The question is simple: why do we hold on to money? And to answer it, we're going to look at an incredible intellectual duel between two absolute heavyweights, John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman. Seriously, just think about it for a second. The cash in your wallet or what's sitting in your checking account, it's not really doing anything for you, is it? It could be invested in stocks, bonds, you name it, actually earning a return. So why do you keep it? This very question is at the heart of what economists call money demand. And trust me, the answer has massive implications for pretty much everything. All right, so before Milton Friedman even stepped into the ring, the reigning champ of economic thought was John Maynard Keynes. His ideas were forged during the chaos of the Great Depression, and his theory, known as liquidity preference, was basically the law of the land for explaining why people hold money. Keynes broke it down into three simple motives. First, the transaction motive. Pretty straightforward, right? You need cash to buy your coffee, pay for gas, just your day-to-day stuff. Second, there's the precautionary motive. This is your emergency fund, for when the car breaks down or you have an unexpected bill. But this third one, the speculative motive, this is where it gets really interesting. This is the cash you're holding on the sidelines, waiting for that perfect moment to jump on an investment. And for Keynes, this speculative part was super volatile and a huge source of instability in the economy. Now you can see this whole idea in his liquidity preference curve right here. You've got the interest rate on the vertical axis and the amount of money people want to hold on the horizontal. See how it slopes down? As interest rates fall, it becomes cheaper to just hold cash, so people hold more of it. But Keynes pointed out a massive problem. When rates get super low, this curve can go almost completely flat. This is the infamous liquidity trap. It's a situation where monetary policy basically becomes useless because if the central bank pumps more money into the economy, people just hoard it instead of spending or investing it. So, at the end of the day, the big takeaway from Keynes is this. Our desire to hold money, especially for those speculative reasons, was just unpredictable and shaky. And that instability meant you couldn't just rely on the central bank to steer the economy by fiddling with the money supply. This was the dominant view for decades, until a challenger showed up. So, picture this. It's the 1950s and 60s. The world is dealing with all this post-war inflation, and Milton Friedman steps onto the scene with a completely different take. He just didn't buy this idea that money demand was some fickle, unstable beast. Instead, he came up with what we now call the wealth theory of money demand. Friedman's big insight was to just stop treating money like it was some special thing with its own weird motives. He basically said, look, holding money is just like holding anything else. Stocks, bonds, even your house. It's just one asset in your overall portfolio. So the question isn't, why do I hold cash? The real question is, how do I want to slice up my entire wealth pie among all the different assets I could own, including money? And to make this idea concrete, Friedman developed something called a money demand function. Now, don't let the word function or formula scare you. It's really just a tidy way of listing out all the different things that you and I think about when we're deciding how much of our wealth to keep as money. So what goes into that decision? Well, you're weighing the returns you could get from other things like bonds or stocks. You're also thinking about what you might earn on your money itself, like interest in a savings account. You've also got to factor in expected inflation, right? Because that eats away at the value of your cash. But, and this is the killer insight from Friedman, the biggest factor isn't your current paycheck. It's your long-term sense of wealth, what he called permanent income. He argued that it's our long-run expectations that really steer the ship, not all the little short-term bumps in the road. And this leads to the absolute core of his argument. Because our long-term income expectations don't just swing around wildly from day to day, Friedman argued that our demand for money must also be stable. And, even more importantly, that it's predictable. This was a direct shot at the Keynesian idea of an unstable, fickle demand for money. Okay, so now we've got our two contenders in the ring with two totally different ways of looking at the world. Let's put them side by side and really see where they disagree. This table just lays it out perfectly. Look at income. Friedman's playing the long game with permanent income. Keynes is focused on what you're making right now. On money demand itself, Friedman sees stability, predictability. Keynes sees chaos and volatility. And check out substitution. Friedman says when you decide to hold less cash, you might buy goods, stocks, bonds, anything. But Keynes thought you mostly just swap between money and bonds. It all comes down to interest rates. For Keynes, they were the main event. For Friedman, they were just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Okay, so at this point, you might be thinking, this is a cool academic fight, but so what? Why does this actually matter? Well, this debate has massive real-world consequences for how governments and central banks try to run the economy. This isn't just theory, this is a policy showdown. Let's break it down into two teams. If you're on Team Keynes, you think monetary policy, the central bank changing the money supply, is often pretty weak. Why? Because of that unstable demand and the whole liquidity trap thing. The Keynesian answer then is usually more government spending. But if you're on Team Friedman, you believe monetary policy is incredibly powerful. If money demand is stable and predictable, then changing the money supply has a direct and predictable effect on the economy. For Friedman and his followers, controlling the money supply is the most important job there is. So if you forget everything else about Friedman's argument, please remember this one thing. His entire case, his whole challenge to the Keynesian world, it all rests on this single powerful idea that our collective desire to hold money isn't random or chaotic. It's a stable, predictable behavior based on our wealth and the returns we can get. And that kind of leaves us with one final question to chew on. These theories were born in the middle of the 20th century, but today we're living in a world of crypto, digital wallets, and instant payments. So I'll ask you, do these new technologies make our demand for money more stable, like Friedman would have thought? Or do they make it more unstable and speculative, like Keynes might have worried? The duel between these two ideas, well, it is far from over.